Hey everyone, it's been over 2 minutes and I haven't been raped yet. So I decided to use the opportunity to answer a question that I get asked fairly often. Stop playing break free from your chains, to break free from your cage. What we don't want to do is go back to a traditionalist world. Hi, I'm Diana Davison, and I've been talking about the behavior of women and men's rights issues, etc., for a fair amount of time, and I'm continually asked if I can come up with a list that explains female behavior and how they manipulate men. This is extremely difficult to do because women are information gatherers. That's their currency, that is power to them. And the first thing that women do with men is to study them and to figure out how to manipulate them specifically. It's always catered to the individual that they're targeting. So you can't just come up with a generic list. What I've come across recently, a show called Snapped, introduced me to some specific cases of women who've been busted, either trying to kill their husband or having successfully killed them. And I liked this series because they have courtroom footage and interrogation footage of the women, which allows us to observe their behavior. I'm going to take one specific and rather stunning case of a woman called Dalia Dippolito. And this was a highly publicized case because the sting operation that caught her was dramatically played out. They didn't just catch her soliciting an assassin, they went through the entire scenario with their undercover cop and then setting up a crime scene, calling her to the crime scene, telling her that her husband was dead, and then recording all of this footage.
The car wired for video and audio.
Hey.
We're staying in Paris.
All right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Man, it looks good.
And then interrogating her, pretending that they were, felt really bad for her, and they just wanted information to try and figure out who might have done this, and then revealing to her on camera in the interrogation room that they had caught her on tape hiring the assassin, and the game was up, and her husband was still alive. They brought him to the door of the room that she was in, and her reaction to seeing him actually alive, all of this sinking in live time.
Oh my God.
He's alive.
Come here, please. Come here. Mike, come here. Come here, please. Come here.
Can't fix it.
Why not? I didn't do anything
I
to
heard
you.
you.
Mike, come here, please. Come here.
I'll link to all the footage below, and I'll link to coverage of the cases below. I'm not going to go through the footage of the case because this can be written off as just one psychopath. I'm going to look at some really amazing, I would say footage, but it's actually just audio recording of her phone call right after all this goes down, her phone call to her husband, and the techniques that she employed to try and manipulate him, even after he knew that she had tried to assassinate him.
Already, I'm positive, like 5,000% sure.
All right, so the basic rundown is this. Michael Dippolito had spent time, before he met Dalia, had spent time in prison for financial fraud. He was in jail for 9 months. He was connected to some really shady people. And when he was released, he'd agreed to pay restitution to the victims of his crime. He had a fair bit of money put away. He bought a house after they got married. It was a really brief affair prior to their wedding, I think about 3 months. And right after they got married and he bought this house, then all of a sudden his life turned to hell. He had somebody calling in with anonymous tips to the police saying that he was dealing steroids and various types of drugs out of his house. And they kept on going in with a search warrant and not finding anything. At one point, drugs had actually been planted on his vehicle, and he managed to convince them that he was being set up because the police knew that that was not the crime that he'd previously committed. He had nothing to do with drugs. It was financial fraud. His house got put into Dalia's name, in part because he was talking about paying off his restitution really quickly and getting off probation. He was on probation for something like 32 years, and as a result of his probation, he couldn't move. They couldn't go where they wanted to go, and he said, well, our life's going to be better if I deal with this. And she saw $100,000 that he had put away was going to disappear. And she also found out that having the house in her name didn't really do much for her because she still needed his signature. So She was behind all of these phone calls. She was seeing other guys, and she was, through proxy violence, getting them to set him up. And then she decided to up her game and actually try to have him killed. So she goes to one of the guys that she was sleeping with, and he thought the whole thing was kind of insane. He ended up going to the police and telling them about it, saying, look, like, I'm sleeping with the guy's wife, but, you know, this guy's going to die if I don't say something here. She's very serious. So they set him up with cameras and then had him connect her to an undercover policeman who posed as this assassin. And they recorded everything. They had all this footage, but the police played it out so that they set up the crime scene and then called her and told her that he was dead, recorded her reaction, and then recorded all the footage of what she had to say about who she thought might have killed him, and listened to her story. Then they confronted her with the fact that she'd been set up and that they had the footage to prove that it was her. She denied it, and then they presented Michael in the doorway, and her reaction to that is part of what I'm going to be talking about. And more significantly, the phone call that she made to him from the police station before they took her to jail. And this is a really great example of the types of things women do, not just this woman. What she did could be written off as sociopathic, psychopathic, whatever, but the techniques that she employed to try and rescue her are just the female technique. This is female manipulation. And we have this great audio of the way that they do this. So let's get into it.
Come here, please. Come here. Mike, come here. Come here, please. Come here.
Can't fix it.
Why not? I didn't do anything
I
to
heard you.
Mike, come here, please. Come here.
So step number 1, come here. Come here, please. Come here, please. And acting all distraught and crying and stuff. What she wants to do is get him into her zone so that he's close to her. Men are so vulnerable to female skin. It's really soft in comparison to male skin, and it has this psychological effect on them, as well as just being close to her. I would guess that if he came close to her, she would have pressed her body against him, then she would have touched his face softly, and she would have looked at him with these big, sad doe eyes, this childish expression that will then make him more vulnerable to her, because he wants to protect her. And for this to work, she has to get him close to her. So that's why she keeps repeating this. And now for the phone call.
Hello? Yeah, what's up?
Nothing, Mike. Please come here.
So again, right off the start, it's come here. And she'll get a little bit stronger with that. She wants him in her physical presence because that will make all the difference.
Hey, listen, I'm not want to fight with you. Honestly, I can't help you. Don't you understand what happened?
What they're saying is not true.
How is that possible?
Like, I'm sitting here. It's not true. It's not possible. You wouldn't even give me 2 minutes to talk to you, but it's not possible. What they're saying is not true.
Start out with the blanket denial and you know me. So she's trying to eliminate all of the actual facts that are in her way, and she's trying to get him in a personal space with her.
How in the hell did I hear it and see it?
I heard what you heard. It's not true. I heard what you heard and I saw what you saw. Everything they showed you, they showed me.
And how is it not? How are you telling me that?
I
It's not.
am giving you my word that it's not true.
So here you have a psychological bonding. I've heard what you heard and I saw what you saw. So she's saying it's like, I'm connected with you. We both know the same thing. She's giving him her word as if her word hasn't just been reduced to shit.
I couldn't help it if I wanted to.
Like, please, I need an attorney. Can you please help me? That's not true.
So he mentions the word help, and she grabs onto that, and she says, I need an attorney, can you please help me? Right? So she's gone from just saying, I didn't do it, to, can you please help me? Because that's the key word in what he said. That's the only thing she has to work with right now.
Your brother was here, and I spoke to him, and he's going to go talk to your mom. I called things for you already, right? Well, everybody knows where you're at. I took care of it.
I know that. I need your help, okay? This is not true.
So he tries to distance himself by saying, you know, I've talked to your father and your mother, and they know where you're at. Everybody knows where you're at, trying to basically cut himself out of the situation. And she goes, I need your help. So she's got to keep him personally engaged.
I understand it, too. Look, how do you explain what I saw and heard?
Like, I limited on my phone call. You know more than anybody. It's not true. Just give me time so I can talk to you.
Again, she needs to talk to him, and she means in person.
What did it say? I saw it. I heard it.
I saw what you saw and I heard what you heard.
And what the f***? You said you wanted to have me killed. I heard that.
It's not true. That is not
How is it not true?
How can you believe that?
How can you believe it? So she knows what he's seen. She keeps repeating that. She knows exactly what he's seen. And she feels that if he comes close to her, if he gets within her zone, that she can convince him that what he's seen is not actually reality. And she's got a good reason to think this.
I heard your voice.
How can you believe it?
What is the point? I heard you say it.
It's not. I heard what you heard and it's not.
What did I hear then? I heard you say.
I heard the tape. Okay, I heard the tape and I saw pictures and I saw the whole 9 yards. I saw all of it.
So why would you meet a black guy in a parking lot? Explain that.
Now she starts talking expansively. I saw all of it because she wants to put that behind them. She doesn't want to talk about what's on the tapes.
So when you're on the phone, I will tell you when I see you in person. Please.
So now it's kind of like information blackmail. She's not going to tell him what he needs to know. And, you know, for people who've been victimized, they need to know why. This is a really important question for them. But she's not going to give him that unless he comes here, unless he comes to her and puts himself in a vulnerable space, which is close to her.
I can't come there anyway. I'm not allowed there.
That's not true. Who said that? They tell you that on purpose. It's not true.
So he tries to protect himself by eliminating the possibility that he can actually get close to her. And she instantly calls his bluff. It's not true, right? And it isn't true. I mean, he could actually probably go there and talk to her, but he doesn't want to. Why did he not just say, I don't want to talk to you, right? He's going to start breaking down a little bit in here. And I'll show you footage of who Michael is in his victim impact statement so you understand that he's not a simp, right? But instead of just saying, I don't want to fucking talk to you, he's going, well, I'm not allowed to.
Diane, I don't know what you could tell me, even if, let's pretend that, oh, it's all better. I can't, they're charging your ass. Don't you get it?
Like, I didn't do anything. Please.
I don't know what to say to you. I can't help you. It's out of my hand.
So now he goes even further. He says, oh, imagine I forgive you. Imagine I don't care that you just tried to have me killed. And it wouldn't matter because I'm not the one pressing the charges. The police are doing it. So again, he's removing himself from vulnerability because he is vulnerable. He's extremely vulnerable to this, attempt of hers to engage him, to get him close to her again. And she's next going to go on, you're not trying.
You're not even trying.
What am I supposed to do?
I'm supposed to have you an attorney, please, so I can talk to you.
You're supposed to get an attorney, please, so I can talk to you. Okay, she's crying now because she's, needs to up at another level. And she's not saying I need an attorney because I need to get out of jail. She's saying, so I can talk to you. She's so focused. I just need to talk to you because she knows that she maybe can't control the police officer. You can see his attitude when she tries to lie to him versus Michael's attitude because she's managed to seduce him. She's in his mind. She's infecting his brain. So she doesn't need an attorney just to get her out of jail. She needs an attorney so that she can talk to him in person.
One thing after another. You can't explain this one. Come on, man.
You think?
Now ain't that the truth? She goes like, that's what you think. No, if he gets close to her, if he gets within touching space of her, then she's pretty sure that she can convince him that she didn't do this.
What do you mean he's dead? You met a guy in the parking lot.
Okay, you needed me yesterday. I took you right before Waterville because of your thing, because of this, because of that. Every time I am here for you. Every single time, and there's no denying that.
Now, she's referencing that he had surgery and that he wasn't recovering from surgery very well, and she took him to Fort Lauderdale. So these little things that women do, they're always like ammunition to use against you in case they get caught doing something like trying to assassinate you.
So why would you need a parking lot and hand him $1,200 and say, yes, I want him dead?
Anybody $1,200. Period.
So how did they get your voice on that tape recorder?
Like, I'm limited with my time, please.
Confronted with direct questions, right? Why did you meet this guy in the parking lot? She's like, I'm limited with my time. Can you please call my mom? She reverts to this personal me, right? I'm limited with my time in this phone call. I only have a short time to get you to do the things I want you to do.
Okay, can you please tell my mom, please?
What can I do?
You can get me money, please.
Is she going to call me?
No, why would she call you? Call my mom.
Now she's giving him a task to keep him involved, basically, to put some sort of a requirement on him, some sort of an onus. No, my mom's not going to call you. Why would she do that? Just because she's my mom and she's the one who's going to be trying to get me an attorney now. You have to call her. So she's trying to force continued engagement from him.
I did call her already. I talked to her, and she didn't believe anything I said, and I didn't say anything bad. I let her know.
And he didn't say anything bad. This is a guy who just found out the same day that his wife was trying to assassinate him, and he feels like he has to justify himself by saying, I didn't say anything bad.
No, you didn't want to help her. I already talked to my mom. You didn't offer to help her. You just said, okay, well, whatever.
You gotta be kidding me, man. Look, Italian, I heard you say that shit.
Like,
Hey?
I'm telling you right now, okay?
You can't fix it. You're nothing to me.
And finally, he says, you're nothing to me. I know what you did, and you tried to kill me. So he's getting finally less defensive of himself and trying to justify his current behavior, and more proactively saying, look, I don't owe you anything. But it won't last. You'll see.
You need to get your lawyer. Your mom's gonna get you. I spoke to your brother. And you need to just handle it. Because, Kelly, listen, if I go screaming to the judge or whatever and say, oh, it's okay, they're charging your ass.
Like, it doesn't matter,
It doesn't
period.
matter. You can hire 5 lawyers. They're charging your ass to have your voice, your face, everything on tape. You're in a lot of trouble.
So again, with this scenario, even if I go on your side, he's not going to just say, fuck you, you bitch, you tried to kill me. He's excusing his lack of help, right?
I'm trying to help you.
How?
Because I'm trying to get your head, get off the bullshit, and understand what's going on here.
What bullshit would that be?
I don't know. How are you going to sit there and tell me that?
There you go. Go for the vulnerability again. I'm sitting here. She's reminding him, I'm real. I'm sitting here. She's waiting for him to get his ass down there and sit right next to her. And her time is running short.
How are you going to tell me that you didn't say it, you didn't do it? When I saw you say it, and I saw you do it.
Do you have any idea how I was when they told me what supposedly happened to you, how I got, and how I was, and how everything?
So she reminds him that if he's seen the footage, she's seen her big display of crying and her despair at finding out that he was dead. And she's like, and how everything? She uses really expansive language, non-specific language, because she doesn't want him to think about the specifics. She wants to keep him focused on things like, I cried, and I took care of you, and everything, and like, I always do everything, and you're my everything.
Right, and you want to move 500 or 5,000% dead.
That's not true.
You're absolutely
That's
sure,
not
right?
true. I heard what you heard, and that's not
And
true.
what did you hear then?
I heard the 5,000% sure. I heard, what else did I hear? I heard the whole thing. Everything you heard, I heard. And not
What
once.
are you disputing about it?
I never wanted to dead, period.
So at this point, she's 5,000% sure that she can explain that wanting him 5,000% dead can be explained away if he just gets his self next to her body so that she can influence him better.
I never paid anybody. I never gave any money. I never
What did you
anything.
pay him for?
I didn't do anything. It's what I'm
Why
trying to
did
tell
you
you.
him? Why were you exposed goes to video camera and tape recorder. Why?
Can you meet me in person so I can talk to you?
It's the key ingredient. You gotta meet me in person. She's gonna withhold information, which should be easy enough for her to explain if she's telling the truth. But no, she needs to meet him in person because that is where men get vulnerable to women, when they're close to them, physically close to them.
No.
Why?
Explain that to me right now.
Why?
Why should I?
Because you know me. Okay, whenever you need me, I am there for you, period. You know that. Or am I not? You couldn't even get off the couch the other day, and I came, and I brought you dinner, and I this, and I that, and I always make sure you're always taken care of. You're always everything. I never, ever, 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 ever in my wildest dreams ever want that for you, ever.
She's extremely confident now. She has spent a lot of time, obviously not caring about him at all, but building up these moments that she can then go back to convince him that she cares about him. She obviously does, because she's done all of these caregiver type things. As if people don't take jobs, careers as caregivers for total strangers. You know, you don't have to be a compassionate person. And, you know, a number of people in caregiver positions, nurses and stuff, it said some pretty fucking vile stuff to the people that they're giving care to. Doing caregiving acts does not actually mean that the person loves you or cares about you even. And I this and I that, and you're always my everything. Expansive language, because to her it actually doesn't mean anything specific. She's not done these things because she actually cares.
Well, you said it. I hired a guy.
No, I did not say anything, period. I didn't say anything.
I heard you.
I didn't say anything. I heard you first. You didn't say
What
that.
the fuck? I heard you say it. How did you not hear it? I mean, how did you not hear it? I heard you. I heard you. I saw you. You know? I saw it. I heard it. I don't understand what you're arguing with me about.
Now, like what I've said before, you could write off some of this technique to just being she's a psychopath, so she's not a true caregiver or whatever. But her use of expansive language, her insistence that he come close to her, these are just typical games that women play in order to manipulate. And that's why we're looking at this conversation. Not to say, you know, she specifically tried to have him killed. And a lot of women won't be going that far. But analyze, as you're listening to this, the way that she is transforming him. He's stating repeatedly, he's seen this stuff. He knows for a fact, because he can't deny what he's seen and what he's heard. He knows for a fact that she's guilty of what he's, you know, what she's tried to do, try to have him killed. And yet he wavers when she confronts him with these emotional scenes. And he's like, oh, you know, like, what do you want? You know, like, he's asking, why would he even ask her, what do you want? At this point, you know.
And what did you take your deposit fee? What did they do? My money?
No, it's paper. What are you talking about?
The fees they found you first. Was that my money tying you right now?
No, they're just regular papers.
No. They were safety deposit fees. I know what it feels like.
Right, and it's got papers. That's it.
They're just papers, you know. These would, of course, be papers connected to the deeds to the house and anything that would help her get her hands on his $100,000 savings. And she's playing stupid, like, I don't even know what they are. They're just papers. So yeah, I have these papers, but I don't know what they mean. To me, they're just paper.
Well, listen. I don't know how you're going to actually have the nerve to sit there and lie to me now. I don't understand. Like, I heard you say it, Dahlia. I saw your mouth do it. Okay? I can't help you even if I wanted to. Do you get it?
Why don't you want to?
It's out of my fucking hands.
You're not even trying. It's different if you're trying. You're not even trying.
What can I possibly do for you? I don't get it. What can I do?
You're not even trying.
You're not even trying. This isn't about, you know, trying to have somebody killed. It's about whether or not he's even trying to listen to her point of view, or whether he's even trying to help her, or, you know, trying to get her out of jail, or trying to get close to her, which is ultimately her main goal here.
Trying what? I'm sitting here like a dumbass.
So he knows that he's a dumbass for even letting her, you know, continue on like this. And yet, even knowing he's a dumbass, he's about to break down and give her some loving advice.
Okay, they're getting ready to take me again.
Daddy, I'm gonna give you some advice, and you need to listen. You're gonna be running around in there for a little while, a couple days. You need to just try and relax and just go with it. And keep to yourself and don't say a lot.
I love you. Everybody treated me awful, so I can't do anything to you. You know me. Everyone is being awful to me.
I can't help you. There's nothing I can do to help you.
And now the tears again, and saying they're treating me awful, and she reminds him they're physically coming and somebody is going to physically take her somewhere else and touch her and interfere with her. And she's doing this as a desperate sort of last, I love you and don't let these people touch me. They're treating me awful. Gosh, they're treating somebody who tried to have him killed so awfully that he ought to care about it. And he does. He just gave her advice, and it was actually pretty good advice coming from somebody who's been in prison, so he, knows what she should be doing.
No?
Now, he doesn't want her to, dislike him because he's doing a natural, obvious thing. It's, this whole, is like, you got to understand, you have to forgive me for not helping you. And why does he need her forgiveness? Because he's acting like it, and now he's gonna get into something he does care about, which is his property, and it reminds him about why he's so angry.
You know what I'll do? You know what I'll do for you? Seriously? What? You sign my house back over to me. I'll help you, Mom. Immensely. Give me my house back. That's it.
That's it, what?
I'll help you. So I don't have to go through the legal bullshit I have to go through already.
What does that mean?
It means sign my property back to me that you stole, basically.
That's what you're thinking, and I didn't steal anything.
So one of the reasons that women's manipulation of men hasn't been exposed and that they're willing to overlook it is because if they'll do something like just give them back their personal property, and because a guy identifies with his financial worth, if they're willing to keep his financial worth intact, they're willing to overlook the criminal, despicable, and even criminal behavior of women and their ruthlessness in manipulating men. And that's part of the reason why women haven't been exposed long ago.
Alright, so listen. I'll have the papers sent over to you somehow. You'll sign them over to me, and then I will help your mother. Okay?
I'm not signing anything.
I know you wouldn't sign anything. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I can't help you.
That's what you're thinking about. I'm sitting here watching. You're thinking about our
Hey,
house.
stop having me killed.
That's not true.
Liar. You're a liar.
What did your mom say?
She's not saying shit. She's sitting there. What's my mom saying? Check it out. My mom, your mom, everybody's mom's all out of it. You know where you're sitting right now? That's the reality.
Now, I don't think that he actually is offering to help her because he's now completely given in. At this point, he's just been reminded again about the stuff that he does care about, that somebody he thought loved him is willing to kill him. Yeah, he's upset about that. But now he's finally getting his senses about him and wheeling and dealing because the property issue is it's going to be less expensive if he actually negotiates to pay part of her lawyer fees instead of just going through the regular court system. The amount of time and the amount of money that it would take for him to get the property back in his own name. So he's starting to get more practical now, but only because he was reminded about the property during this conversation.
I can't fix it. I just offered to help you, and again, you have the balls to say no to me. Okay? Then I can't help you.
How do I believe you're going to help me if I do that?
Because you know why? Because I'm the one person on the phone that's ever done what they said they were going to do. Me. Okay?
How do I believe that?
I don't say shit. I just said I'd help you. Okay? You basically said you to me, which is hilarious considering your situation and considering what the fuck has happened today. Have your mom call me. I'll talk to her about it. I told you what I do. I'll fix it. I'll help you. You gotta do the right thing. Alright? That's it.
All right, so there you have it. I'm going to put all the links below, including his victim impact statement, to show you what kind of a guy we're talking about. This guy was pretty hardened. He'd spent time in jail, and he was, he wasn't a pushover, we'll put it that way. And yet he was taken in by this female manipulative behavior. Now, this conversation is just one example. And I think that if you go back through your mind and you think about all the arguments you've had with women who were definitely in the wrong, you'll see them use a lot of these tactics. But it's not comprehensive. There's a lot more that goes on. And like I said at the beginning, you can't just make a list of how women manipulate, because it's all catered to the individual. And they spend a lot of time collecting information. When feminists talk about power in society, and look at things like who's actually got a specific job title in a workplace, or who, what gender the President of the United States might be, or whatever. Women have a different sort of power, always have, and it's based on information. Information is like money to women. That's their currency. That's where they get their power. And they spend that currency through emotional dramas and emotional displays. And then they somehow manage to get this image of being, the compassionate ones, the emotional ones, the caring ones. What you need to do to understand female manipulation is to approach the story, the methods, the techniques being employed by someone like Dalia. Look at the difference between the police officer's reaction to her in the interrogation room and the way her husband reacted to her saying the same things. And try to be like the cop.
Everything has been recorded. You were photographed in the convertible when you sat in his car in the front of CVS. What do you want to do? What do you want to do here?
I didn't
Dalia?
do anything.
Listen to
I
me.
didn't do anything.
You're going to
I didn't
jail.
do anything, please. I didn't do anything.
Tell me you didn't do anything.
I didn't do anything.
You're going to jail today. As soon as I'm done, they're going to come in here and handcuff you and take you to the Palm Beach County Jail, book you for solicitation of first-degree murder on your husband. Your husband is well and alive.
Thank God.
Oh, yeah, thank God.
Please? Can I see him?
No, he doesn't
please?
want to see you.
I so wanted to see him.
He doesn't want to see you.
Please?
You better quit your playing. Listen to me. I want you to quit your acting and get this over with.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I'm not.
Okay. You know what? You need a real good attorney. You need a real good attorney, because we're going to show them the film where you say you're 5,000% sure you want him dead. You think I made that up? You think I made that up? It's exactly what's going to happen. I'm talking with you. When I leave this room, no other officer will ever talk to you again. The next time we see you is when you're in trial. You can make it right here, or you're going to trial, and you're going to do life in prison. You want to cooperate with us, whatever you want to do.
And now for the rape joke of the week. I always go for a run after sex. Can't risk getting caught,